I remember all of you and appreciate it. And, I remember it being very disheartening because
Hmm.
it was a part of my life that I loved so much. I was so passionate about it. I love sports. I witnessed, you know, fans going to Husker football games and loving men's sports, and then just to not really get any attention at all
Right.
for our games was disheartening. And we'd have doubleheader games like they did back in
Right.
those days, where we'd play at 5 o'clock and the men would play at 7:30. Well, the most fans that ever came to see us play was a game we were playing Fort Hays because we went into overtime,
Hmm.
and all the people were pouring in for the men's game, and it was like we ended up winning this game in overtime, and I hit the big shots at the end of the
Right.
game, and people were actually cheering, and it was that was like my only experience of having a crowd and really kind of cheering us on. So it's grown so much. I'm so happy for the young players and the people of today that are really being appreciated for what they are doing on the court and off the court and all of those things. But yeah, it wasn't quite like that in the '80s when I was going to college.
So when you graduate after this accomplished career and you had an idea of really what you wanted to do to be a teacher and coach, and you spent a couple of years at the local high school,
Hmm.
and how did that transition go? And how was it good to have preparation for what would eventually be a stint as a college coach?
Yeah. So as I was finishing up college, I was also an athletic trainer for the softball team.
Hmm.
And because I knew that I wanted to be a coach, I wanted to be able to take people's ankles and things like that if I were
Right.
going to be a high school coach. And my fifth year, no, actually it was my senior year, we were down here in Kansas uh, going to a softball tournament. I was the trainer for the softball team, and there was word that a blizzard was coming in through the Midwest. And so we left the tournament early and we started to drive back to Nebraska. And we get snowed in Concordia, Kansas. And at the junior college there, they actually allowed us to stay at the student union um, to be protected from this blizzard because a bunch of people were going to stay at the armory. So
Right.
this probably sounds like it's way off the track, but there's a reason I'm telling this story.
Okay. I imagine.
We we get stationed in this student union to hunker down with the blizzard, and instead of being out at a softball field that weekend, I was indoors, and we turned on the TV, and the 1987 NCAA Women's Basketball Championship was on television. And I saw Pat Summitt on the sideline winning her first national championship. And I just looked at her and I thought, I want to be her. And I had just finished my college playing career, and I was so impressed by her on the sideline and her team and how dominant they were. And I had this stirring in my heart that even though I had trained to be a high school teacher and coach, that I wanted to be involved at the college level. And
Hmm.
so I did get a job at Kearney High School. It was right there in Kearney, Nebraska, and it was a Class A big school. After I went to a very small school, and it was a real honor to be able to get my first job at a big school like that. I coached the freshman basketball team and was an assistant for volleyball and track and all of these things, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being a teacher and educating young people and being a coach, but like there was this tug in my heart that I wanted to be involved with college athletics. And so I reached out to the head coach at the time at the University of Nebraska. Her name is Angela Beck. And I said, I'd love to be involved with your program somehow, be a grad assistant or whatever I can do. And she invited me to come down to basketball camps a couple of summers. And I got to know the staff. I got to play basketball with some of the Huskers on the court. I really I just found my place, and then I got hired to be a grad assistant at Nebraska. So I only was a high school coach. That's what I planned to be my
Right.
whole life, and I only did that for 2 years before I moved on to coach at the University of Nebraska.
And you did that for 5 years, and that kind of led you in a different direction eventually, as something that was maybe ahead of its time was Nebraska Public Television was doing maybe more women's sports than other places. How did you
Yeah.
move from the coaching ranks, although you would obviously keep that coaching aspect of it with your entire career and eventually in coaching and making videos and such like that. But how did the thing at Nebraska Public Television come about?
Well, because I had coached at the University of Nebraska, I was a grad assistant for a couple of years and full time for 3 years. And they did broadcast at least 3 of the games every year. It was funny because a couple of guys, local guys, I don't even know what their jobs were, but they would come in and they'd talk to our head coach, and then they'd call the game and on Nebraska Public Television. Then we'd go watch the game later, and we're like, what are these guys watching? Like, like I remember so specifically, so vividly that Angela Beck, our head coach, had told them that we were considering playing the zone against this opponent, but kind of depends on how things went, etc. The game starts. All the guys could talk about on the broadcast was this zone defense. Well, we didn't end up playing zone, and they were just talking about this zone the whole time. And I'm just going, we're not playing a zone.
Oh,
and
boy.
right. So
Yeah.
quite honestly, I thought that I could do better than them.
Right.
And so when I got out of coaching, I went and I reached out to the people at Nebraska Public Television, and basically I said this. I said, I don't have a broadcast journalism degree. I've never done television before, but I know the game. I know the coaches. I know the players. I like to talk. Would you give me a chance to be an analyst on the broadcast? And that's how I got into broadcasting, was just by going and asking and seeing an opportunity, because I love explaining the game. I love breaking down the strategy, the X's and O's. I love the stories behind it that people don't know about when they just come to the game or they watch it on TV. I just really love being an advocate for women's basketball, and also like educating people to what they're seeing so that it draws them in and makes them appreciate it, or helps them to understand more what they're watching. And it's something that I was passionate about, as a coach, as the fans, our fan base started to get a little bit bigger in the early 90s, but it was always a struggle. And I thought, what can I do to draw more people to women's basketball, to let them know how much talent there is on the court, how much hard work goes into this, all of this. And it just when I did those first games on Nebraska Public Television, the ball went up, and I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like this, I knew right away that was what I was meant to do, and that started my broadcasting career.
Well, I'd like to thank those idiots who can't tell a zone from a man-to-man for bringing you to the broadcasting situation and allowing me at times at the University of Kansas around the turn of the century, which is a funny phrase to say now, to do some
Right.
some games with you. And while you were maybe have some connection with KU, I didn't know this story. This is like the craziest story ever about how you took another step. You just went to a game at Allen Fieldhouse and didn't want to stand in line, so you went through the media entrance. And what happened then?
The sports information director at Kansas at the time greeted me at the door and said, "Oh, good, you're here." And I thought, well, that's good, because I just snuck in the door. And he said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Ready for what?" And he said, "To do the national television broadcast today." I looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" I had done, television, like 3 games a year for Nebraska Public Television. I'd probably done 1 game a year for Kansas, and some games with you on the radio.
Yep.
And basically what had happened is the announcer on the national Fox Sports broadcast had double booked and didn't tell the people at Fox Sports and didn't show up. And so on 15 minutes notice, I got to make my national television debut, calling the KU K-State game as an analyst on the Fox Sports broadcast.
And that started what has been a remarkable run. And you were such a natural, and I couldn't believe that. Actually, thinking back, that you were that much of a novice when I was working with you, because it was always a pleasure to work in those particular settings. But that you have to do a different variety of things, obviously, as a freelance broadcaster, and it's still women's sports, and the money isn't fantastic. So you just found a bunch of other ways, including Coach's Edge, to create a full portfolio, as it were.
Yeah, it's interesting how your career path goes, and that's why I'm always so fascinated by, how people earn a living and what they do to fulfill their passions and their ideas of what they want to contribute in this world. And when I was getting out of coaching, I happened upon this software company that had this animation software where the circles moved on the basketball court to show the timing and the movement, the spacing of a play. And I actually, it was in 95, I was just leaving my job at the University of Nebraska, and I saw this exhibit at the Women's Basketball Coaches Convention. And I went up to the gentleman, his name was Chris Davis, and I said, man, I'd love to be a part of this company. I love to, educate people about the strategies of sport. And this is such a cool thing. I mean, it was 95. Coaches were barely using computers at the time, and it was really ahead of its time. And Chris said, well, I'm just a former coach that me and two of my buddies developed the software, and it's not even really a business, but you can come help us get started. And just happened that he was in Lawrence, Kansas, and I wanted to move down to the Kansas City area because at the time the NCAA was here, and the Big 8 conference at the time, and Win for KC was just getting started. And so, I wanted to move to this area. And so I helped get this business started in this guy's basement. And we started developing videos and animation software. I even got to animate all the plays for the 1996 women's basketball Olympic team and put it all together on a video for Tara Vanderveer and her staff. And I did some really cool things. And then what happened with Coach's Edge is we presented it to the guys at CBS Sports that covered men's basketball. A gentleman named Bob Dekas was the executive producer, and Chris Davis, our founder, went up to him at a KU men's basketball practice and opened up his laptop and showed the circles moving on the basketball court. And Bob said, how do we get that on television? And it really launched our business, Coach's Edge, and we ended up doing these animated plays on CBS broadcasts of men's basketball for several years. And then Sport Vision, the original inventor of the 1st and 10 yellow line that everybody can't live without now,
right?
That company bought Coach's Edge. And then a few years later, half of our staff was laid off and the other half of our staff was laid off, and only one guy survived from our original Coach's Edge. But it was really cool because it opened doors for me, because while I was building my broadcasting career, Sport Vision offered to ESPN for them to use one of their cool high-tech telestrators to use during the women's NCAA tournament, the women's Final Four. And this was about in 2005, and ESPN was like, okay, but who do we get to operate it? And the one remaining guy from Coach's Edge said, well, Brenda broadcasts games for you as an analyst, and she worked for us at Coach's Edge, so she would be able to do it. And it's what opened this door that I got to from 2005 up until 2020. I got to be in the truck for every women's Final Four and for several WNBA finals. And I got to use this cool telestrator to draw lines and spot shadows and everything to kind of describe and show what was happening on the court. So the analyst that was calling the game could use that cool technology. And so, the time at Coach's Edge and the guy in Chris Davis's basement turned into some really cool opportunities for me with ESPN over the years.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Did you experience hail damage last year and never got the work done? Most insurance companies only give you a year to get the roof fixed, and if you don't get it done, you could possibly not be compensated in full for the replacement of your roof. If you've been procrastinating getting that damaged roof taken care of, give us a call at 913-257-5426, and we'll send out an expert to help you through the process. We're never pushy, we're just here to help. Easton Roofing. Integrity.